Hello and welcome to the Dennis Report. I'm Dennis Atchison. We live in communities, sometimes small, sometimes big, but we live together, and how we organize how we live together is a key piece of our happiness, our livelihood, and what we call home. Today's guest is going to speak to the design element, the intent element, and very much the passion element to how we live together, how we build communities, how we design communities. And given that there's a lot of revitalization going on, how do we shift from having lived one way for a certain period of time based on design to another way? And how do we revitalize downtowns? How do we get more out of what we have? And how do we do it in a way that makes us all happy? Gracen Johnson is an urban researcher and a community motivator, community builder, community activist, something like that. And we're really pleased that she's here today.
Thanks for having me on.
Good. And away we go. So to start, maybe if you could share with us some of your educational background and kind of how you got there and how you landed in New Brunswick and in Fredericton.
Great, I can do that. So I have a multidisciplinary background. I studied international development for my undergrad at the University of Guelph. And there I studied a whole bunch of different disciplines, from agriculture to marketing, just a real grab bag. And one thing that was consistent through that is just a passion for climate change. And near the end of my degree, I realized that if I was really passionate about low carbon lifestyles and doing what we can to mitigate climate change, I really needed to look at urban form, because most of the world lives in cities, and if you live in a particular urban form, you are really fighting against the current if you want to be able to live a low carbon lifestyle. So at that point I decided I wanted to start studying urban planning, and I looked at how suburban lifestyles impact how we spend our time, how we travel, how we spend our money, and I looked at how urban lifestyles can challenge that. And so for my graduate degree, I did a master's in urban planning, growth, and regeneration, which focuses on, in particular, the economics and politics of dealing with places that are experiencing decline, and what kind of mechanisms can we use to deal with that, or even just kind of slowly let things happen gracefully rather than collapse.
When you mention about the decline, American media has been really full with what's happened to Detroit the past 2-3 years, and now starting to show some stories about how it's revitalizing itself. Canada might be a touch different because we've got a slightly different demographic. A lot of people, they would know that there's a science and a study and an approach to urban planning, but they might not know, they might know it through popular media, like Peyton Place or movies where they did the urban environment where you go to the mall, the notion of a mall, which didn't exist 50, 60 years ago to the degree it does today. So it's like a cultural phenomenon that you're dealing with, as well as a design phenomenon that people are just used, this is the way it is. You live in the suburbs, you have a car, you travel this way, which gets to your higher carbon footprint. So, so how do we start with the suburbs, and how do we move them into what does the other version look like?
Well, we're still trying to figure that out, because in a lot of ways this other version looks like a lot like cities that had existed for hundreds of years before the suburbs. But of course we have to blend in all of the differences that we have now in the 21st century, right? So we're trying to figure that out. What does it look like? Is it a city that's wired up? Is it a city that has solar roadways? Is it a city that has all of these different things? I mean, my confidence that it looks like an older city, cities before we entered into this suburban experiment, just comes from the fact that it's been tried and tested over generations. And it's a preference that people are already displaying. So when you say that it's a cultural shift that needs to happen, well, it's a cultural shift that's actually already happening. So I grew up in the suburbs. My family are farmers, so I spent a lot of time on the farm, but I was a suburban kid. I went to a suburban school and a suburban high school. And there's a lot of people my age that grew up in that same situation because for 60 years we had put almost all new families out in the suburbs. That's where new development was happening. So we have this entire generation that has grown up in the suburbs, and a lot of us can't afford to move back into those neighborhoods now that we're on our own and independent, or we don't want to. And at the same time, you have a lot of people that initially bought those homes that are at a retirement age, and they're thinking, I've got 3 or 4 bedrooms and I don't need them. I'm tired of mowing the lawn and shoveling the laneway. I would like a smaller place where I can live. It's going to cost less of my fixed retirement income, and I'm also going to have access to all of these things that I can now have the freedom to do because I don't have kids to worry about. Yep. And so we have this cultural shift that is already happening. There is an increased preference for urban living. And when I say urban living, I don't mean big city. I just mean urbanity, a sense of being in a place where you can walk around and there's people you don't know, and there's things to look at on the sidewalk, and there's a town square, and there's events, and there's parades, and that sort of thing. Well, that's sort of a small town urbanity, but and there's a huge range of urbanity, but people are already displaying that preference, and that cultural shift is happening. And so the way that we graduate from the suburbs back to a more established and a more tried and tested way of living is really by following what people are displaying, what they already want.
That would make a nice segue in for the video you did about nice.
Yeah.
Because you did the thing about 15 nice things in Fredericton where you live. Could be about St. John or Moncton if someone in those communities would do something similar. So maybe give us a little bit of background to why you created the video, and then we'll cut and show the audience the video that you did.
Yeah, I guess the background can start with, I used to live in Toronto, and I decided after grad school that I was going to move to Fredericton, which is a much, much different lifestyle. But it was important to me, and I was really attracted to this idea of understanding what life is like in a smaller city. And so I spent a year and a few months just meeting people, working, trying to get myself involved in the community. And there were all sorts of things that, I mean, people tell you all the time that everyone they know moved away, everyone's working in the oil field, that it's just kind of a crummy place to live. You hear that a lot, and I think everyone says that about their hometown, so I don't think it's just a maritime thing. But you do get that narrative a lot, and I realized that after a year and 3 months, I didn't want to leave. You know, I'd gone through the process of not having a job and trying to find work for myself and create work for myself in a field that there's no industry for here. That whole process didn't actually necessarily push me away because I met so many people that are just doing wonderful things here. And it's a very charming place to live, but everything that's charming about it is not something that was designed by our urban planning policy or our government policy or anything like that. All of the good stuff is just neighbors who like me, felt they really liked this place and they wanted to make it a place that's worth coming home to. It's a place that's cool, it's a place that's enjoyable, it's a good place to retire to raise kids, all of that stuff. And so one of the examples I learned about, I was on a bike ride on the north side, and there was a guy working on his bike in his garage. And I just kind of pulled in and I said, hey, can I ask you a couple questions? You look like you've lived here a long time. And I was asking about the Carlton Street Bridge at the time, but he ended up telling me a story about the train bridge, which is now the walking bridge, and how it was a huge, huge, huge battle to get that converted into a walking bridge. And I'm sure anyone who lives in Fredericton now can't imagine the city without it. It would be a city completely divided because it would be very, very unpleasant to get from the north side to the south side in anything other than a car. And so you think elderly people, children, children couldn't cross, children can't drive. So it is a really cool story to recognize that, we have the power to change the places that we live. And it's you know, the Margaret Mead quote that everybody refers to is, you know, never doubt that a small group of people who really care about something can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever did. Yeah. And so you see that here. And the process of making that video was just me doing almost like a checklist of all the things that I'm really grateful for every time I walk through downtown. And the people I look at and think, man, you are doing just a wicked job. And seeing you put in all that effort really makes me want to put in effort too. And the more we can cycle that sense of goodwill and just neighborliness, that's how you create a wonderful place that's great to come home to.
So we'll take a pause and you guys will watch Gracen's video clip.
When I came here a year ago, I made this video that people really liked. It was about the reasons I moved to Fredericton. I talked about being in love with a special guy. I talked about the charming downtown, the social events, and the lower cost of living. So that's why I came. A year later, the reason I've decided to stay a while is all the people who are quietly just killing it in little old Fredericton. It's cliche, I know, I love this place because of the people, but really, it's people, neighbors, champions, advocates that make all the magic happen. At one point, they decided to stay, just like me, because their work matters here and makes a difference. And they inspire others to make a difference too. To show my appreciation to some people who have really inspired me, I decided to make some public thank yous. A team of friends and family joined me to pin a ribbon on 15 favorite things around town that are super chill about it, but are definitely killing it. Nice job, everybody. That's just a small list of some of my favorite things outside the front door. Many of them have become such a central part of life here that we forget that they were not always available, or that maybe they had to dodge red tape to exist in the first place. Fixtures of life, like picaroons and the walking bridge, were once just an idea. It took inspired and persistent people to see a vision and make it happen. By meeting people, I've learned that the Fredericton I love did not come prepackaged or designed by government policy. It was built slowly by good neighbors going a little above and beyond because it's worth it. That's such a comforting thought, because you can't take that kind of power away. The power of people actually caring and doing something about it. It's not something that depends on a provincial budget or the party in office, and it's not something that you grow out of either. In fact, as Maritimers get older, we'll be lucky to have more folks with extra time, extra wisdom, and skills to be killing it all day in the community. I've been made very aware of the challenges we face in New Brunswick. But living here for a year has shown me how many people are rising to those challenges, one neighborly act at a time. And we all can too. We just have to want to. I do want to. And in shorthand, I've been calling that mission Front Doors. Here's what I mean. So before moving here, every advertisement told me of the wonders right outside my back door in New Brunswick. You know, the rivers, the ocean, the forests. The world outside our back doors here is phenomenal. I brag about it too. But I think we under-recognize the wonders outside our front doors in every small town main street or city centre. It's the public squares, parks, patios, sidewalks, festivals, and local businesses that make a place nice for everyday living, working, socializing, and growing older. It's our front doors that will make people want to stay and build businesses here. And it's life outside the front door that makes you want to give back. So here's how I want to give back. With the help of some friends, I'm putting together something called Front Doors. For now, it's a website to celebrate and cultivate more of that good stuff. But if you like what we're doing, it can be more. It could be a place to organize neighbors, fundraise for community-led projects, and issue much-deserved thank yous. But for now, we'd love to hear from you. Who's a good neighbor that makes a difference outside your front door? Tweet it to FrontDoorsNB. Oh, and by the way, if you want a guided tour of the 15 chalk ribbons around town, you can download a map at frontdoorsnb.com or pick up a copy at the Picaroons Boutique.
So we hope you enjoyed that. I know Gracen had a great time making it.
Yeah, I did. I actually ran into you.
Yeah, stealth mode late at night. And she was very clear to make sure that it's chalk art, it's not paint. But what a wonderful thing for you to be inspired to do based on what was inspiring you from the community and create that positive vibe with that. To flip it another way, to create a different tension, is like, so from your perspective, what is it that cities don't do well and what could they be doing better?
Oh goodness, that
is... I know.
We could talk for a long time about that question.
So pick one, because we all live here, we all fell into a situation, circumstance, these are our lives. Mm-hmm. So how do we nudge it, change it so that it starts to move in? Yeah. Do you have a priority? What should go first? Is it roads? Is it housing design? Yeah. Is it how neighborhoods cluster?
Yeah. Well, we have been using in the urbanism field a term that's kind of a catch-all for the past little while, and that's walkability. Mm. So that is number one priority, and it's a handy term because it incorporates almost everything else. If a place is walkable, by necessity, it is a place that is, dense enough. It's a place that feels safe. It's a place that is comfortable, that is interesting, that's vibrant. All of those things contribute to walkability. And so if I can just break that down a little bit, walkability in essence just means that you would choose to walk rather than drive. It's more enjoyable and convenient to walk than drive on a regular basis.
And does it mean everything's within walking distance?
No, it doesn't. In fact, you could have a very walkable city that is massive, and you need to take public transit to get to certain parts, but you need to be able to walk to the public transit, right? Okay. So public transit cannot exist without walkability, but walkability can exist without public transit, as we see in a place like Fredericton, which has a very, very stark bus system, but it does have a bus system, but it's essentially a city without public transit. Mm-hmm. And it's a very walkable city. I live downtown without a car, and it's really not that hard to do. Mm-hmm. And we bike a lot, and we really enjoy it. We get a lot of exercise, so that's great. It means that you have to, go ahead.
Keep going, no.
Okay, so if we go back to the term of walkability and what that means, there's all sorts of elements of urban design that go into making it more attractive to walk than it is to drive. So it doesn't have to be distance. It's also about what it feels like between point A and point B on foot. So you want your walk to be safe, to be interesting. You want your walk to be useful, which is, you actually can get where you want to go. And if it's safe and it's interesting and it's comfortable, and it's useful, then people are going to want to do that. And safety has a lot to do with perceived safety as well. Mm-hmm. Do I feel safe walking on this sidewalk? Even though I've got a sidewalk, does it really feel like I'm being protected from cars that are maybe going 60 or 70 kilometers an hour and splashing water all over me and not looking for pedestrians? So, safety is a very relative term, and a lot of it is in our heads. And interesting is another term to think about. If you think about walking, for example, if you're at a big box center, a big power center. So in Fredericton, ours is called the Corporate Center. Studies show that people will drive from one building to another, right? And I've done this before. Yeah. I have done this. I have driven from, I don't know where I was, from Costco to Winners or something like that. Yep. Because it's a boring and unfriendly and not safe walk to do. Yep. But that's about the same distance as probably, 4 or 5 blocks of Queen Street. And who is going to drive from York Street to Regent Street on Queen Street? Because it's interesting, it's safe, it's exciting there. You have windows to look at, and it feels like an environment where it's built for people, not for cars.
So walkability doesn't necessarily imply that in your 10-block radius you're going to find your grocery store or your pharmacist. It means something different, like the quality of the walk. Maybe all those things are within that loop, but it doesn't mean you're self-contained within that loop for all of your needs.
Yeah, ideally you'd have what you need. Ideally, in a perfect world, you'd be able to walk to work, right? But realistically, that's a really hard thing to do, especially if you have a 2 or 3 person household. You know, you have a child and maybe 2 parents, and they all work in different places or go to school in different places. So you're not always going to be able to meet that, but it does mean that you've created an environment, exactly like you said, where the quality of your walk is high enough that it's actually preferable to getting in a vehicle.
I know you brought with you some slides.
Yeah.
Do you have some slides that help teach our audience or share with our audience more grounding in what you're referring to?
Yeah, well, there's some...
Pull some up and we'll show them to you on the screen as we go through. So maybe one of the first ones would be about, is this a walkability one?
Well, I think this one is actually really helpful.
Good.
What we're looking at here, and you're going to see this on screen, this is a map that my partner made. His name is Ryan Bordeaux, and he works with data. And then I just affixed these 2 photos to the bottom. And this is just a funny little map that he thought was pretty useful, but pretty useless, but quite interesting. And it just puts a color-coded dot on the streets for what they're named, sort of the suffix of the street. So is it Charlotte Street? Is it Kimball Drive? Is it something Court or an avenue? And you can really tell by the color of those dots, streets are generally older, and streets are for walking. Streets are people skills. A drive, as is very obvious by the word, is for driving. And if we look at just the examples on the bottom, so this is in fact Charlotte Street and Kimball Drive, the difference in environment there, it's not that Kimball Drive is a bad place to live or anything like that. It's just a place where you're expected to drive. It's clear. There's an extra lane, like a turning lane is there. There's extra wide sort of, I don't know what you'd call those, embankments on the side of the road, just in case a car goes off and hits a poor pedestrian on the sidewalk. Whereas in Charlotte Street, it's a lot more narrow. You've got on-street parking. You've got street trees, beautiful old street trees that in many newer areas would be torn down because they're considered a traffic danger. You've got the houses are right up to the sidewalk, and it makes it a much more pleasant walking experience. And so it's clear that we understand this in the words that we use. When you're naming things so that it's kind of abundantly clear in the name that it's not a place for walking, then that's a pretty big indicator.
Yeah, it's an indicator for design, and it'd be interesting to see the same for St. John Moncton or Miramichi on what they do, because we kind of just live a day, and we just sort of do a day, and we don't necessarily, even though we're experiencing it every day, we don't necessarily catch that, oh, this could be different, or this could be more enjoyable, or this is creating a certain lifestyle that has a certain size carbon footprint, and I don't know how to change it, which gets into why the design. So walkability implies also a design concept.
Absolutely. Walkability is very much about design.
Yeah. And it's not to say that a street is better than a drive.
Exactly.
It's about being aware before you build the thing about the impact on humans.
Yeah, and some parts of our city are meant for driving. And, you know, I'm not going to change that. Not all of the city needs to be these tight little walkable areas. But it does mean that when we're building new housing options for people, when people are looking to buy a home, we should be giving them more options that resemble human-scaled environments, whereas most of what we're building now is very much car scale. And it's interesting that you mentioned other cities as well. So Ryan produced this, and he told me, oh, hey, look at this, you know, it's absolutely useless, but pretty cool, eh? And I said, oh, that's amazing. And so he posted it on his website, and it got picked up, and there was journalists in Toronto and Vancouver that actually studied those cities as well, using the same methodology, and it's pretty consistent.
Yeah.
We have streets and we have roads.
Yeah, and to give complex data in a simple image form is a powerful thing to do because you can see it with a picture. Okay, where do you want to go from here?
Well, let's see here. Here's a good example. So I'm going to show a slide now. This is not my slide. This is by a friend and colleague of mine named Chuck Marone, and he's from the organization Strong Towns, which is strongtowns.org. You can find all sorts of wonderful stuff there. And we are looking at a picture of one of the main streets in his town, which is in central Minnesota. And this is many years ago, and you can tell that it's been built up over the years. It started out as a whole bunch of little shacks, and eventually as people lived there longer and they made money, they started adding second stories and third stories and beautiful facades on these buildings, and you've got on-street parking. This is a really great place to be. You can see there's kind of banners across the road, and you can imagine a parade going down that street.
And the parking's at that angle? Yeah,
angle parking is really, really great. It's easy to get in and out of. It's got awnings. I mean, this is this is a walkable block. There's everything's going on right here. And then another example, this is the same street after 60 years of all of our misguided planning and engineering wisdom.
So all those big buildings that were there are now gone?
They got torn down or they burned down and they were replaced with parking lots.
And so there's one era of planning or vision for how to build up the street, and it was what we had with the big old buildings. And then like a generation or two goes by, and this is like the next generation's vision of what to use this land for.
Yeah, and Chuck also, he calls this a wasteland of strip malls and parking spaces. But he talks a lot about just how we've taken the opportunity when things burn down often. The investment that we put in is just not... It's not up to the standards. It's not up to the sort of the time-tested approach that has been going on in the past. And often we just put in things that are very short-term. It's short-term thinking, and it's not creating a place that's going to last. It's not creating a place that people care about. If you look at this block, there's probably, I don't know if anyone would even want to rebuild this as it was.
It's hard to imagine it's the same place.
Yeah, well, and you look at that.
Because of the contrast between the two.
Exactly, and this is actually following all of the instructions that we've put in our big engineering and planning rule books for the time being.
Contemporary urban design.
Yeah.
Well, also, when I see the second slide of the flat building and the crosswalk and not much going on other than some parking.
Yeah.
Nobody walking in the photo.
Yeah.
Or maybe one.
There's
Sorry,
one person
right
crossing
in the middle.
the street where there's no crosswalk.
I also think of the challenges that all three of New Brunswick's towns or cities are dealing with, because St. John, Moncton, and Fredericton all have spaces that you could take a photo very similar to that.
Like that.
And so part of the challenge is, how do you shift the vision for how to use that property?
Yeah. Well, and the way that Strong Towns often communicates this is actually the real kicker. So if we take this old photo, beautiful, beautiful street. We've got businesses, we've got probably offices on the second story, we've probably got lots of people living here. There is tons of rent coming out of this street. Okay. There's enough rent to justify granite facades, right?
Okay.
And Chuck points out, he is a former civil engineer, so he understands traffic engineering. He says, the reason that our cities are going bankrupt is because there's $500,000 of infrastructure in this photo right here.
Okay.
And there's nothing to show for it. What kind of rent do we have coming out of here? That's probably free parking.
So where's the $500,000 in infrastructure? The street?
It's the road. It's the curb outs. It's fire hydrants. It's all of these things that we have supersized.
Okay.
And made, do we need 4 lanes of traffic here? I don't even know how many lanes are here.
Okay.
But do we need that? Mm-hmm. There's not a car on the street, and that's up to code. That's up to standard. But it's way more than we've bargained for. And across North America, we have just built way too much infrastructure per capita.
Okay.
And it's because...
So it's the same between Canada and the States? We both have the same direction or habit or
I would say
ratio?
The same trends. Same trends. It's not... I think in Canada, we've been a little bit insulated on... America is just bigger and better in everything, right?
Yeah, it just
including their
faster.
mistakes.
Yeah, it runs faster, runs hotter.
Exactly. Yeah, and so this is just an example. And like you said, you can take both of these photos from pretty much any city, any old city. And you can see places that we've built that are just not, this is not a lovable place. This is not a place that people will make a postcard of.
Yeah.
This is not a, no one would have taken this photo except for Chuck to make the point that it used to be beautiful.
Yeah. So then what can, to push to what a solution would be, do you have an example of what a different plan would look like moving forward, maybe based on your tax base, multi-use tax base?
We start using our brains. We start looking at this and being like, oh, do we really need this many lanes of traffic? Do we really need this much pavement here? Why are we doing all of this? And we start looking at where the money actually comes from. And so now I'm going to show you a slide. This is, again, not my slide. This is from my friend Joe Minicozy, and he has a firm called Urban 3, and we can provide a link, I'm sure. And so this is a slide depicting the difference that we have in all sorts of things, in land consumed, in property taxes, in retail taxes, in housing, and in jobs per acre when we do different styles of development. And the way he looks at it, like on a per acre basis, is because he's looking at a city like a farm. Okay. So a city has a limited amount of land, right? We have certain area of land.
Especially if you're on an island or if you're up against a lake.
Exactly. Think of Prince Edward Island, right? Yeah. Prince Edward Island can cultivate certain amount of land. They're not getting any more.
Yeah, it's like Montreal.
And if you were a farmer looking at your field, are you going to grow an entire field of a very low value crop or a high value crop? And so he's looking at the high value crops of our cities. And in doing so, he often compares what we think is the big money maker. So every time you get a big dealer like Walmart or Costco or something that's coming to town, people are super excited because they think, yes, we've made it. We're finally a big city. We're getting these great new retailers, and they're going to bring us so much money with all of their retail taxes and all of that. And what they're not looking at is the inefficiency of that model of development. If we're building the road and we're building the pipes out to their massive parking lot, and they're sprawling out there, it's a very low value crop. And that's something that people haven't quite clued into, but Joe makes this obvious. So he's taking an example of where he lives in Asheville, North Carolina. The Walmart versus a single building downtown, which is extremely land efficient. It's using, 0.2 of an acre versus 34 acres. It's got retail on the bottom, it's improving the street frontage, it's got office space, it's got residences on the higher levels. So it's got 90 people living there, and it is just whopping the Walmart in every category. And so our money makers, and this is consistent, Joe and his firm, they look at cities all across the continent. They've been to several in Canada, they've been all around the States, and they do these assessments about where is the tax revenue coming from in our cities.
Every city asks that question all the time.
Exactly.
It gets to be February, and municipal budgets are starting to come down, provincial budgets are starting to come down, and they're all asking the same questions the same way.
And the answer is not to go looking for, well, it's not that Walmart is bad. It's that this format of building a Walmart is bad.
Yeah, you're doing a comparative analysis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, and what happens when Joe goes to all these cities is he gets a map that looks a little bit like this. This is another one of Joe's slides. So he's studying Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
That's really different.
Can you spot where downtown is? This is those spikes in the graph are tax revenue per acre.
Okay, so the purple has to be the downtown.
Purple is downtown, yeah. And you get little spikes in these other sort of regional centers.
Because they created, if the lens is tax revenue per acre, then the lens is density and vertical in terms of the kind of building that you use. And then the human side would be the walkability, the pleasantness, the human experience of it.
Yeah, and Joe is not saying with this that that this is necessarily the best, the tallest building is the best building in town. What he's saying is, just look at the numbers. See where your money's coming from and see areas that are actually a liability or negative to you. And make the judgment.
But what you're showing us is there is a direct correlation or relationship, a healthy one, between this sort of design compared to what we've lived with the past 50, 60 years, which is to build the suburbs, build more roads, build more infrastructure, build malls, and that had a certain quality of life, but if your argument was an economic one based on tax base, then you were going in the wrong direction.
Exactly, and the quality of life doesn't have to be sacrificed. If we flip back to this slide, you know, this is not an ugly building by any stretch of the imagination. You know, this is the time-tested design for a building.
The downtown one.
It's not so big that it would be offensive to people. There's plenty of buildings that size in St. John.
Yep.
It's not unpleasant to walk by.
It looks like St. John. That image looks like St. John.
Yeah, it's not blocking the sun. It's not causing the problems. You know, and so you can have really, really great returns that still, it's just killing it compared to Walmart. Yeah. You can have great returns without making skyscrapers. You know, skyscrapers would be sky high in terms of value,
yep.
But you as a city need to decide what you want. And it has to balance out at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And you just have to accept that, you know, your downtown areas are subsidizing the rest of the city. And so this is really interesting. And my partner again, Ryan, he decided that he wanted to take a look at what it looks like in Fredericton.
Okay, if I could interrupt you just a sec.
Yeah, for 1 second, yeah.
Yep, we'll take a pause here for a moment or two, and when we come back, we'll catch up on the next slide. This is really fascinating stuff, and I'm sure our audience is sitting there going, oh, I never thought of it this way. So we'll be back in just a moment. Okay, welcome back, and we pick up where we left off. So Gracen, walk us through the next slide.
Yeah, so I was just showing you what it looked like in Chapel Hill, North Carolina from Joe Minicozzi's numbers. And we were really interested, well, how would this look in Fredericton? Because it's consistent, you know, around the continent, you constantly get this sort of spike downtown, and then it just fizzles away everywhere else, where you're building less efficiently, where you're building Walmart.
Yeah.
And so Ryan found the best he could the numbers for Fredericton, and he's created this. So when you look at
percent more or less.
Yeah, so it's percent more or less tax revenue created per hectare. So hectare because we're in Canada, compared to the median. So how we can read this is the red is like red hot. It's really hot area, high tax revenue compared to the median. And then blue is cold. It's much lower tax revenue compared to the median tax revenue. Okay. And so when we look at this, I've just got 3 sort of thumbnails here from the city of Fredericton. Mm-hmm. Our downtown is red hot. All of those blue blocks that you see downtown are generally, you know, they're cemeteries or they're public property. So they're not getting any tax revenue. Those are not failing properties. They're just not taxable.
Yep, don't fit the category.
Everything else is just red hot. And then you get into sort of the more residential areas, still very, very good, mm-hmm. But it's a little bit lower. And then we're gonna go up the hill a bit, and all of a sudden you see the color change.
So the further you go from the old downtown core, you have a shift in your tax revenue.
Yeah.
Which in a way makes sense because that's where housing starts to emerge more than commercial.
Absolutely. It's residential. It's not as many stories, that sort of thing. You don't have the mix of uses, and it gets cooler and cooler as you get away from downtown. But what's really noticeable is if we look at, so here this is right above the YMCA. Sorry, you can't see my mouse.
Yeah,
if you look at the first thumbnail, it's getting cooler, but it's still quite hot right around Brunswick Street, George Street, Charlotte Street, up in that upper left-hand corner.
And Gracen's talking about the top one that says downtown beside it. It's bright red mainly.
And if you go to the second slide, you're going to see it's still, you know, that's a residential area, yep. And the second thumbnail is a residential area, but there's a difference there, right? Mm-hmm. It's the amount of people that we're able to include in a same area. And I live right in one of these downtown neighborhoods, mm-hmm. And I do not feel cramped at all. It's not that high density means that you're living in a shoebox. No, I've got a really, really great apartment, and it's just that we don't have massive parking lots and driveways and garages.
So this information is trying to synthesize in the need for attention to tax base per hectare, the design element that goes with that, the impact of when you do urban sprawl approach as opposed to downtown approach, or even as you move from the old core downtown part because it's got the history and it's got the starting point and stuff. But somewhere in there we'd started about the revitalizing side. To how do you keep this juice so that when a downtown core gets gutted because they build the big box stores, and you can go through most any downtown anywhere, in New Brunswick it would be the 3 cities, that there's vacancies, there's questions, what are we going to use this building for, the renovation costs. So can you help bridge this grid with red and light blue and dark blue, and then where does that all lead us?
Well, here, I think we're almost done with this, so I'll get rid of that. But in terms of justifying where we spend our development,
or how to shift into the next phase, because we did it one way for 100 years, and then the past 70 we've kind of done it another way. Yeah,
and it is a challenge to try and figure out what is the best way to approach that, because as far as I know, I'm pretty sure our finance people at the city understand this. I was just reading a budget from I think it was about 5 years ago, and I was reading it being like, yes, you're right. You know, you get it. Yeah. All of these, and so I don't know where along the line it's getting lost in terms of implementation from the city's perspective. But from our perspective, it's just incremental. You know, as citizens, you and me, it's people, how those downtown neighborhoods got so hot is because people added an accessory apartment. You know, they said, hey, we've got this carriage house in the back. Wouldn't it be great if grandma moved in? And so they renovate it. And then all of a sudden you have this new apartment there that's excellent, affordable housing in a downtown environment. Or they say, you know what, we don't need this much space. We're going to make this a duplex, and we can have someone else move downstairs or next door. And so it happens just incrementally. All of us become investors in the city, and that's how we change it, is we decide that we're going to shift our time frames. We're not going to worry about, you know, what things are going to be like in 5 years, or how to get the most money in the next 5 years. We start thinking about, if I want to build a city that my children will want to live in and come home to, so that if I have grandbabies, that I get to rock them in my rocking chair where I want to be, then you need to shift your time frame to thinking about 50, 100 years in the future. What kind of investments can we make today that are going to age well? Because all of us can drive around the city and we can spot things that we know will look terrible in 50 years. And no one's going to want to live there. Yeah. No one's going to be able to sell them for a good price. And it's really taxing from the city rather than contributing. Whereas we can look at buildings that have been around for 150 years, 200 years, and say, every time I walk by that, I know that it's actually increasing the value of everything around it, because it's beautiful, it was done well, and it probably took a really long time to build it. But we did it step by step by step, as we had the money, to do it. We didn't just go try and win the lottery by building, you know, God knows what.
That's you speak to another value that sort of has gone away, the build it as you go thing. That's something I haven't heard for a while, and yet that used to be the norm compared to going in depth.
Yeah, this is a strong town's mantra. Like they really believe that we should be taking these incremental steps, and they look at that as, you know, what have we seen worked well in the past? Well, in the past, we couldn't get monumental loans that were never expected to be repaid. So if we wanted to build something, we needed to have the money to do it. And we needed to do it brick by brick by brick, as we could afford to do it. And so that's how you built these beautiful places, because they had to provide a financial return. You weren't going to build something that you knew was just going to tank in 10 years, because your time horizon was so much longer. You need it to last, right?
Seems to me, with Fredericton as the example from your slides, Downtown Fredericton Inc. and Main Street Business North have both recently rolled out some sort of a redesign plan. Have you had any chance to, have you seen those?
Are you referring to the city center plan, or?
I think so.
The city center plan is great.
Is it?
Yeah, it's got all the right pieces in it. You know, they brought in some very thoughtful people to work on it, and from what I see, it seems like a great plan. The challenge is implementing it, right?
What makes it great? Well, what is it that struck you?
Well, it just recognizes how important the downtown is. It's the beating heart of the city, right? Yeah. Your downtown is, it's not this, I don't want to make this downtown versus everywhere else. What I'm saying is that we get not everybody wants to live in an apartment, but
well,
we need to understand that we have to have a certain percentage of our city as higher density, really high impact investment, so that the rest of people can live with their yard or their single family home. Because otherwise, we just run out of tax money. We don't have enough taxes to pay for all of the low density stuff, and so. I just lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
What were we talking about?
Was there something in that mapping out of revitalizing the downtown core? Was there a specific, because you've spoken in like general terms, but was it an expansion of trails? Was it a design feature that they were going to put in that would draw people to, is it closing down the street at all so there's some vibrancy that way?
There were a huge number of just really, really great ideas. So one of them was restoring the importance of Carlton Street. So Carlton Street downtown used to connect to the Carlton Street Bridge, which is now just those piers in the water, or the pillars in the water. And it used to be a very, very central avenue to cross through downtown. So they want to restore that a little bit by just creating a more walkable environment, a more sort of shared space model of the street. So you feel like you're safe biking there or walking there, and it's not exactly just, wait for your turn before you can enter the road. It's just everybody belongs to that street. So that's a really cool model, and that's got some historical relevance to it. And it goes all the way up through the Loyalist Cemetery and through that neighborhood towards Sobeys. And so you could have a lot of impact, I think, by focusing on what can be done with Carlton Street. Because right now there's a lot of parking lots and blank building faces on it. And as soon as you change that, I think that it's got the natural workings for a good spot. Another thing, which is probably going to be very unpopular with a lot of people, but it is a very good idea, is to get rid of the cloverleaf on Westmoreland Street Bridge.
Really?
There is a ton of the waterfront that is just dedicated to highway.
Yeah.
And a downtown is not the place for a highway. And almost every city in the States, big city, made that mistake. This was Robert Moses. It was a really, really bad idea to put highways through cities, because this is not a place where you should be driving really fast. And we need to rectify that.
Yep.
And so that's another great idea.
Wow, that I can imagine that go over. That'd be like in St. John or in Moncton, changing some of the major road infrastructure they have there for the sake of livability, walkability, quality of life.
Well, it's a big thing for people, but I think it's because we think that it's going to make the world collapse. When really, when you look at a lot of things, when you look at a lot of people that have tried this and they've said, you know what, we can actually probably make this work with, any number of smaller scale intersections. Traffic goes faster. Because we over-engineer things, right? When we over-engineering them, it turns into a mess. And I think there's a lot of alternatives there. And I can't promise that traffic's going to go faster. Maybe it'll go way slower, but the city is going to be better for
more vibrant. Well, then you find other solutions to traffic densities, like public transportation, or you find other ways, and more bikes or something.
Or you find a better, there needs to be more ways to get across the river if you're not in a car. Because the problem right now is, you can't really get across the river unless you're in a car, or unless you're in that very narrow area where it's convenient to take the walking bridge to get to work. So it's just, I think that can be a lot to be done there.
We're using Fredericton as the example, but all the cities, including Miramichi, up in Bathurst, they've all got the same challenges with learning from you that if you feed the downtown area, or where your gathering point is, whatever it is, where people like to cluster and have that sense of their identity in town and the connectedness and all of that, that ends up supporting an awful lot of what happens after that.
Yeah.
You're also inviting a whole other way of looking at this, rather than just the mechanics of how you build a city or a town. You're looking at the feeling of how you build a city and a town with the walkability thing. Is there something you would suggest, is it like the first 2 or 3 things, 1, 2 or 3 things that every city should try to pay. So say someone's watched the show, they get excited about the stuff that you're offering, and where do they start? Like, how do they begin to shift? You know, we've got these pieces. St. John's got the pedway system that you put in, which totally changed how you got from the hockey rink, which I'm blanking on, Harbour Station, to the convention center. You know, it changed part of the culture of that town, and restaurants started to pop up. And Moncton's got its unique design because of the tide coming in, or the tidal bore, and what you can develop on that side or not. But there must be a pattern or something consistent that every community needs to kind of catch this first, catch this second, the rest unfolds for you.
Yeah, well, and you know what, that's a really great point for you to bring up, because you know, I highlighted in the city center plan 2 things that are very big projects, and those are long-term projects. Those are hard things to get done. And so those aren't easy things to do, and they're not things that are going to happen immediately. What we need to do is make them inevitable. And we make them inevitable by doing little steps, right?
Okay.
And so for regular citizens, and I count myself among those, I'm not employed by the city or the province or anything like that. So I think that, for example, in the Carlton Street regeneration, what we could do is just put out something like a lemonade stand on the street. You know, there's blank walls. There's nobody doing anything in that parking lot. How can we repurpose that asphalt into something that's more productive for the city and more enjoyable for the city? And they can be tiny, tiny little things. And, you know, we have to figure out ways to get around all the bylaws that prevent you from doing anything good. But, you know, if there's a church parking lot there that's used 2 hours a week, how can we use that space, which is in the heart of the city, and activate it for the other how many hours of the week, where the church would benefit? You could pay rent to them, and the street would benefit. And it's all those tiny little steps, and that's how the old cities were built, right? It's just, you know, one building, one business owner at a time. And so I think that that's the way we always need to be looking at things. If you're a homeowner and you've got extra space, maybe it's turning your property into an income property, and then, you know, you've got your rent paying your mortgage, and you're helping create more vibrancy downtown by having someone else live down there, a little bit more density, right? Yep. It could be planting food. I think we should be growing food downtown. We have lots of lawn in this country, way too much grass. I think in the US there's actually more grass than there is corn. And that's impressive, and just wasteful. And so if we can start growing food and making everything a little bit more productive, it's about looking at space and saying, how can I make this something that improves the space around me? I love the term regenerative, because I love the idea of giving new life to things. And if you can take something that's blank and barren and boring, and you can turn it into something that's offering new life, even if it's just kids hawking lemonade on the side of the road, then it's those little steps that actually turn into larger scale change. Because can you imagine if Carlton Street was just covered with people that were doing all sorts of fun stuff? You know, there was street art, and there was galleries, and you know, outdoor galleries, and people had food trucks and all of that stuff. Then it would only make sense to turn it into this cultural corridor that they want to make it. But you can't manufacture that from the outset. It has to be built by us. That's
a key point. Yeah, and it gets lost sometimes in the exercise of design, so that sometimes the design comes from us. So there needs to be a bridge built somewhere with the powers that be to let go a little bit of what their original map was into, but this is what the community wants to help create in that space, because they're actually alive and juicy and making it happen now.
Yeah, well, and even just to encourage people to take their own steps and help be a part of making the plan happen would be incredible. And I don't know what the city has plans for it, so you know what, that could entirely be part of exactly what they have on the table right now, and I'm not sure. I'm actually not really sure where it's at in the process right now.
The next piece, yeah. Same thing for the other side of town. And there's a lot of that going on in St. John and Moncton as well.
Yeah.
St. John I'm more familiar with the downtown revitalization.
Yeah.
And vibrant community stuff.
And there's good people working at the city, and both, you know, there's great people, it seems, working in Uptown St. John. There's great people working in downtown Fredericton. Yeah. I've been really impressed by a lot of the people that I've met, and sort of the more institutionalized way of doing things. But when it comes down to it, we have to step up as neighbors.
Citizens, yeah. So we have about a minute left. what would you like to do to wrap up? What final note for our audience to go?
You can't lay that on me.
Good. No, because it's been awesome, because you're adding another layer and another lens and another perspective, but also showing the energy that it's just up to us to go do it. You want to change your town, then you have to go do it.
Well, okay. I guess what I can talk about is, so at the end of the video that we showed, there was this thing that I put on there called Front Doors. I really need to update the website. But if you are interested in taking those next steps yourself, I would love to get in touch, because over the next year, I'm really hoping to talk to different community groups, friend groups, about what kind of interventions in the city, what ways that they can mold the city that they want to do, and I want to be a part of helping them achieve that. So if you have an idea for something that you think would be fun and to improve a vacant space, then I would love to hear about it and to potentially help you get that done.
That'd be great. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
It was awesome. As always, thanks for watching. You can catch the Dennis Report on YouTube if you look for the Dennis Report. In there, on the copy underneath, you'll find links and stuff that Gracen's referred to when we get it posted, so that you'll be connected to Gracen and to some of the videos that we've shown. And thank you again for watching, and as always, be good, have fun, and love each other.